What's up everyone? Are you ready to edit food photos on your iPhone like a professional for free? If that's something you're interested in, stay tuned because I've got some stellar tips and a step-by-step process to take a photo from this to this in under 5 minutes. And the best part, you're using just your mobile phone. So let's jump in. So today's video is a continuation from last week's video where I showed you exactly how I took photos like this and this using just a camera on your iPhone. And I also shared some little known hacks to get some incredibly professional looking photos. So you can definitely check out the video over here. But today we'll be editing our photo in the free Lightroom app. So let's first open up the Lightroom app and you'll notice that there's a blue plus button with a landscape photo at the bottom right. And when you click on that, this will allow you to either go to all photos and select photos that are already within the Lightroom app. So these are photos that have been previously imported into Lightroom or have been taken within the Lightroom app. Or you can also import from your camera roll, which is what I'm going to do now. Now this will bring up all the donut images that I took last week, and I'm actually just going to select one of them to import into the app. Now if you want to select multiple images, then just click the 3 buttons on the top right hand corner and then press select mode, and then you can come in and select multiple images to import all at once. Now once you've selected the images that you want to edit, this is what your screen looks like, and the first thing I like to do when I'm editing my photos is to actually crop my image for the media I want to use it for. So when I go into crop, click on the bottom left corner, which is currently set to 3:4. Now let's say I'm going to be using this image for Instagram stories, which is a 9:16 crop. So I'll check on 9:16 and then I'm going to come in here and adjust it as I see fit. Now you can also straighten the image by using the lines that you see like a curve at the bottom of the screen. Just hold the lines down and then rotate the image left and right, and you can see the degree that it's actually rotating depending on how much you rotate the image. Now, in case you want to kind of go back and correct yourself, you can just double tap on these lines and it goes back to 0. And this works for any slider that you're actually using within the Lightroom app. Just double tap on the slider and it will automatically go back to its default or 0 settings. Now you can also press the undo button, which is a squiggly arrow or an upside down arrow at the top of the right hand corner of your screen, and this will undo the last action that you just performed. Okay, coming back to straightening, you can also automatically straighten by pressing the straighten button, and the Lightroom app will actually do it for you automatically. So once I've decided that I'm happy with the crop, I'm happy with the amount of straightening, then I just press the check button in the bottom right hand corner to finalize the changes that I've just made. Now, one of the great things about Lightroom is that it's really user friendly, and all the buttons or sliders or panels are actually set in an order that you want to actually perform your action. So the first thing I did was do the crop and the straighten, and you can see that the next panel is all about lighting and exposure. So that's exactly where we're going to head into, and it's actually got various sliders for controlling the exposure and contrast details in the images. Now the first thing I like to do in this interface is press the curve button, which is over here, and this will take you inside what's called the tone curve. It's one of my favorite sliders or tools to use within the Lightroom app. Now, to put it very simply, the tone curve represents all the light pixels that are in your image. So the bottom left-hand corner represents all the dark pixels or the pixels that are in the shadows. The middle part of the curve represents all the pixels that are in the midtones. And then in the top right-hand corner of your tone curve, this is where you have all the pixels that are in the whites and in the highlights of your image. Now, if I actually put my finger on any part of the straight line that's going across the middle of the tone curve, you can see that dots start to appear. And I can actually pull these dots up and down and manipulate different parts of the image. So if I pull the one that's at the bottom left completely, this affects the darkest parts of the images, and you can see as I'm pulling it up, it makes the image more gray or the dark pixels lighter. So if I pull that up, you can see the black parts are getting affected in the images and are becoming much more gray. And if I take it to the other extreme and pull the dot in the top right-hand corner, then that's affecting the highlights or the whitest parts of the images. Now, pro tip here when using Lightroom, whether it's on desktop or mobile, play around with the sliders and pull them to their extremes to see how that affects the images. This is a great way to learn exactly what that tool will do for your photos. Okay, back to the tone curve now. So the way I like to work the tone curve is to literally make an S curve within the curve. So I put 3 dots in the middle of the tone curve, and then I pull them around and experiment with them until I get to a place where I like what the contrast looks like in the image. Now, a little is going to go a really long way, especially when you're doing this on your mobile and you don't have as much control as you do on a desktop. So make sure you're light-handed when it comes to making any changes, especially when it comes to the tone curve. And then once I'm happy with the changes I've made and the image looks well contrasted, then I'm going to press the tick button in the top right-hand corner or press the done button to move on. I then like to come in and play around and see if my image needs any increase in overall exposure. Now, I don't generally play with the contrast slider very much because I feel like the tone curve does a better and more detailed job. And then if I feel like there's any areas that are blown out in the image, I might decrease the highlights. I also like to come in and increase any extra shadows that I may have in the image, but again, be careful with that because it's your shadows that give your images depth and that 3D quality. And then finally, if you want to add any extra contrast to your image, you can also play around with increasing the whites and decreasing the blacks in the image as well. So lots of ways to do the same thing. Now, once you're happy with the changes that you've made within this light panel, you can then move to the next section, which is your color. Now, the first thing I like to do in the image is actually correct my white balance by adjusting both the temperature and the tint. Now, when I look at this image, I can tell straight away that it's actually a little bit on the cooler side with extra blues that I don't really need. So I could just increase the temperature and make it a little bit warmer until it feels more realistic. Now, because I use natural light, I know that my windows have a green tint to them, which also gives any images I take using natural light an overall green cast. So I can increase the tint slider to add more magenta to my image to actually counteract for this. Now, anytime you want to check what your edits are looking like and compare it to the original image before you made any changes, you just need to press on your screen and hold it down and your original image will come up. And then you can see that it says before on the top of the screen, and then as soon as you let go of your screen, then the current edit will appear. So that's a quick way to check your before and after, and I like to do that periodically as I'm editing. Now, I generally don't play with the vibrance or the saturation here because when it comes to colors, I like to play with my colors on an individual and local level rather than making a global adjustment. So, for example, if I did come in and I did increase the saturation, then you can see that every single color in my image becomes much more saturated and deeper in color. And the vibrant slider is similar, but it doesn't increase all the colors, but only the muted colors become a bit more saturated. So not all the colors in your image and not all the colors like saturation. So like I said, I don't like to play with these two sliders, and instead I will come into the individual colors. And to do that, you need to press the color wheel that says Mix. Now, this is where I can actually individually adjust the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of different colors. So, for example, in my image over here, the background appears quite blue. So I can actually press the blue color, and then what I can do is I can come up and change the hue of the color. So if I want the blue to become more purple, then I'm actually going to slide to the right. And if I want to make it a more turquoise blue, then I'm going to slide to the left. Now, in my case, I'm actually going to keep the hue exactly as it is, but what I do want to do is decrease the saturation so that the background actually looks more gray rather than blue. And so I'm going to decrease the saturation slider. Whatever you do, you just want to make sure that any edits you're making, whether it's to color, exposure, contrast, your images still look realistic. Now, for this particular image, I can't decrease the saturation of the blue all the way down. It's actually going to become black and white and look unrealistic. So let's just reduce it to an amount that looks suitable and realistic. Now, I can also play around with the luminance of the blue, and this is what will make the blue brighter or darker. But in this case, I'm actually going to leave it as is. Now, I also mentioned that my window generally gives a green tint to my image. So I can come into the green color and I can actually reduce the saturation of the greens. But again, I just need to be careful because I also have green sprinkles and I don't want to reduce the saturation too much. So I'm actually happy with this amount of reduction. And I don't really want to adjust any of the other colors in the color mix, so I'm going to come out of this panel and move to other parts of my editing. So again, I'll just give the screen a quick tap and just check what the before and after looks like. So once my colors are adjusted, the next thing I like to do is go into the effects panel. And this is hands down my favorite panel to work in because you can really bump up the clarity and the sharpness and really just adjust how contrasted and clear your images look. Especially if you've got an image with a lot of light pollution, say you've taken it in a room that's very bright and white with lots of white walls. So what I like to do is either bump up the dehaze slider or the texture slider. And again, you want to be careful about not going to extremes here because sometimes that can start to make your images look a little bit dirty and a little bit grainy. Once I've made changes to the dehaze and the clarity or the texture, then you also have the ability to add any vignettes. Now with this particular image, it's a white image with a whitish background, so I don't really want to do any vignettes. But just for your information, if you are using vignettes, then they're better off done inside the local adjustments, which can be found in the bottom right of your setting panels, where it says masking and healing. But these are only available on the Pro plan. So if you are a pro food photographer and you're working with clients, this is something I highly advise you to do because you have a lot more flexibility with your vignette when it comes to local adjustments. Now, before I export the image, I like to also just hold my screen down one last time to see how far I've come, if I'm happy with the overall edit. And you can see here, this is what the before image looks like, this is what the after image looks like, and I'm actually really happy with the final image. So now I actually want to export the image and actually save it to my camera roll. Now, you can actually export the image to another app such as Instagram, or actually save it to your camera roll to use at a later time. So what you want to do is press the share button across the top, and then if you press the share to button, you can actually change the export settings. So you can see you can actually toggle from JPEG to TIFF, you can change the dimensions, you can increase or decrease the quality, as well as add things like watermarks. So there's a lot of customization available here. But I'm going to actually just X out and just share this to my camera roll, and it's as easy as that. So if I actually head into my camera roll, you can see that the image is right here and ready to use. Now, I just want to quickly bring your attention to the presets button at the bottom of your panel. And next week, I'm actually going to show you exactly how you can use presets to add more creativity to your images, to add your own stamp to the images, to get more cohesive images, as well as to get a faster workflow so your editing takes less time. So make sure you're subscribed to know when that video hits. Now, if you enjoyed the tips that I've shared on editing today, you're gonna love my free guide, which has even more editing tips on lighting, composition, on your camera, as well as how to make money in food photography. So make sure you download that whilst it's available using the link in the description box below. And I also want you to check out this video that I made all about lighting. Now, when it comes to food photography, no matter how good your editing skills, no matter how good your composition, if your lighting isn't on point, there's no amount of editing that's going to make any difference. So make sure you check this out. That's it for today, but make sure you're subscribed so that you know when that video is hitting next week, all about presets. There's actually a special offer in that one. But otherwise, stay safe and I'll see you next week.